is a breaking news edition of Jets Final Drive. He's Zack Rosenblatt. I am Connor Hughes. The Jets, we know they are looking for a defensive coordinator. Now they are looking for an offensive coordinator as well. Tanner Engstrand, if you want to say he was fired, if you want to say they mutually agreed to part ways, whatever you want to word, he is no longer this team's offensive coordinator. So the Jets are looking for a special teams coordinator. They're looking for an offensive coordinator. They're looking for a slew of assistant coaches. Zack, just yesterday, we were saying that we were grateful that we'd been able to go week by week with content to talk about. Now we can't even go a day before we have to jump on here with an emergency pod to assess the state of this team because I don't know what the Jets are doing, if I'm going to be completely honest with you.
I think at one point I tweeted something. I think it was like my first or second year with the Jets, and I used to just quote tweet it or just retweet it every now and then, where I say, every week the Jets do some SHIT that you've never seen before. And so the Jets are doing something that I have never seen before right now. I'm never as prepared as I think I am for breaking news. Like I think it was always in the back of my head that like the Tanner thing could go sideways, and all the conversations about him taking a demotion and them openly trying to find his replacement, like there's always a chance he'd be like, you know what, I'm good. And yeah. I guess I just didn't expect it to happen yet, and so it did. And so here we are doing an emergency pod. I think it's our second one. Our last one was trade deadline, which we had a lot of fun with.
Yeah.
This one is a little less fun because people losing their jobs and stuff. But I don't know, man. This is we have a lot to talk about, but I'd say I wouldn't feel optimistic about the direction of this team if I was a fan right now, and I'm sorry to say that.
Yeah, and it's funny. I should never do this, but I was going through the YouTube comment section, not the one not the live chat, which we appreciate you guys again wherever you guys are watching us, whether that's SNY.TV, X, or if you're over on YouTube. That's the place to be because we have that live comment section running throughout the duration of this show. You can pop on in there, ask questions, and then throughout the course of the show, we have Sam Candles producing this episode for us. She's going to monitor it, let Zack knows what's said, and then we'll address those questions and concerns in real time. But I went through and I read the comment section after the episode was posted up on YouTube the other day, Zack, and everyone was like, these two guys are so negative. These two guys are so negative. And then there was another Jet fan who came in as a comment under the comment and goes, dude, what's there to be positive about right now? So I think the best way to begin this show, and like I said, we do have a lot we've got to get to here on an emergency episode of this one, but just how we got to this point, I think, is an appropriate trip down memory lane because you've had a chance now to talk to your sources in and outside the building. I've had a chance to talk to sources inside and outside the building, coaches who have been let go, some of the coaches that are still there, coaches who have talked to coaches who have been let go are still there, just to kind of get a picture of what happened. So Zack, chime in also, like cut me off and chime in so this can be a little back and forth here. Season ends for the Jets. During exit meetings, Aaron Glenn meets with all of his coaches at different points and talks to them. And it was relayed to the assistants from talking to sources that they were open to explore other opportunities. So if there was a lateral position, it didn't sound like the Jets were going to block that. And you've seen those comparisons across the league. Like Jeff Ulbrich is a good example where the Cowboys wanted to interview him as a defensive coordinator. Would him at a lateral position from the Falcons? They said no. Defensive line coaches you see, running back, that's very commonplace in the NFL.
Yeah.
The Jets basically opened that up where coaches could do that.
Yeah. What you do, which is something you like leave open the door. If you're a head coach that's coming back, you don't do that if everybody's 100% safe. So,
yeah.
If he said that to every coach or not, but not to like cut off your storytelling there, but I'd say like the next step of that is like as of like a week or two ago, a lot of those coaches, not all of them, but a lot of them thought they were under the impression that they were safe at that point. So,
yes.
So you get to a couple weeks ago, and if you want to take it from there, you can. But I just wanted to pop in and say that because like I'd say while they definitely like made it clear that like, okay, we're still sorting through what our staff's going to be, at a certain point they were like, okay, I think based on my conversations with AG and how this is going, and I feel like I'm going to be coming back in the same role that I had last year, and I include Tanner Engstrand in that. I don't think as of the end of the season he felt like he was going to be the offensive coordinator and that
Correct.
he was going to be calling plays. So
Correct.
Things have changed over time.
Correct. And now, quick edit of myself. There was a slip of the tongue. The Jets are not moving on from Chris Banjo. He's coming back. It's just offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. I didn't realize. Sam just texted me. She goes, "There might be like hysteria right now in the comments."
I tweeted earlier. Congrats, Chris Banjo. You won the latest season of Survivor because he's just the last man standing now.
There you go. So as Zack said, like they said, don't. It was the perception that was given off by the assistants was that, yes, we can explore their opportunities, but we're safe, but we're good. We fast forward to this week, and the Jets are looking for a defensive coordinator. We know they're bringing in Wink Martindale for the second interview on Saturday. From my understanding, talking to sources, it was or actually, let's go this part. Before Wink flies in, it breaks out that the Jets have gotten rid of a bunch of the assistants, the Charles Londons, all of that stuff. A bunch of these guys were let go. From my understanding, direct hand knowledge from this, those coaches were, quote, caught off guard, unquote. They were led to believe, and again, the Jets can feel differently about this. Aaron Glenn can feel differently about this. They could possibly have never actually said you are safe. But these coaches, because of the time that had gone by from when the conferences had gone, the way they had been operated, basically conducting business as usual, they believed that they were safe and they were fine, and then they were completely caught off guard when they were let go. Amongst the decisions that were made of the coaches that were fired was Tanner Engstrand. From talking to multiple sources, the Jets were not planning on firing or letting Tanner Engstrand go. Their plan was to demote him for whatever reason, and we're going to get into it, but they were going to demote him. They were going to strip him of his play calling. Another veteran was going to come in here and call plays, but Tanner Engstrand was going to stay on staff as the offensive coordinator. A couple days later, news breaks that Wink Martindale is going to be flying in to interview in person for the defensive coordinator vacancy. From my understanding, from talking to sources close to the situation, there was a feeling that this was just a formality. This was I-dotting, T-crossing time, and Wink was going to be named defensive coordinator. When he showed up, conversations started to be had that while Wink was not ruled out, Aaron Glenn preferred to call plays for the Jets defense. And having now talked to multiple sources that have had conversations with the Jets in the coming days about this defensive coordinator vacancy, Aaron Glenn wants to call plays for the Jets defense, which, if you know anything about Wink, who has been a long he is not going to be one calling defensive plays. Moving forward here now, we get to the point where Tanner Engstrand has been let go. And I think ultimately what probably happened here, Zach, and this is a little bit of reading between the lines, and from talking to team sources, they said conversations were ongoing, we were discussing things, and we decided that it's mutually beneficial if we go our ways. When the Giants and Brian Dable took back play calling a couple years ago from Mike Kafka. Kafka was basically shoved in a broom closet with no say. Like, he was involved some in game planning, but it was Brian Dable's show. I don't think that Tanner Engstrand wanted to go in the broom closet. Like, I think that he was like, what am I doing here, guys? Like, you're bringing in somebody, and we're going to get to this regarding Frank Wright. You're bringing in somebody that you, from what I was told, quote, want to be the head coach of the offense. Like, yeah, I'm going to retain my title. Yeah, I'm going to get the paycheck, but like, I'm not going to be doing anything. What are we doing here? And I think ultimately they just decided, let's part ways. Tanner's going to go a separate way. The Jets are now going to move forward with an offensive coordinator search, which, by the way, Frank Wright can't be hired tomorrow because now the Jets are looking for an offensive coordinator. They need to satisfy the Rooney Rule, which means interviewing two minorities. So Tanner's gone, and it's a surprise. It's absolutely a surprise that we're sitting here right now.
I mean, it's not just a surprise for you and me. It's a surprise for people who either are or were on that coaching staff. Yeah. Like, this is a process that has taken people aback because there are people in that building either now or that were in that building recently that were fired. That Aaron Glenn kind of changed course and changed what his plan was, or what he had iterated was his plan. Clearly he had some conversations and changed his mind on a few areas, including Tanner Engstrand, I think, is the biggest one. I didn't think he was 100% locked to be safe at the end of the season, because the offense, when you finish, 29th at scoring or whatever, like, regardless of the context, like, it's fair to say a guy's not going to be safe. But if you look back at our podcast, I even probably phrased it that way, but I thought, and I feel like you felt the same way, he at least showed some promise. Like, it was bumpy at times, but I thought he deserved a chance to coach, a quarterback willing to throw the ball down the field, or a quarterback that wasn't going to hold on to the ball forever, or not coach Justin Fields and Brady Cook. Yeah. And he's not going to get that. And I, from his perspective, and again, like, this is reading between the lines. I haven't heard this or anything necessarily, but I can't imagine he's sitting there. They're telling him, yeah, we're gonna let you keep the offensive coordinator title, but we're gonna interview a bunch of guys to replace you in your job. You're still going to have the title. You're still going to stand in front of the media every week as the offensive coordinator. But we still love you. But like, we want somebody else to call the plays and completely take over your responsibilities. And I can't imagine over time that and as it became clear that he was not going to be calling plays. I think it was a fluid conversation over the last few days, from what I understand. Like, nothing was definite as of a couple days ago. But as these conversations progressed, Tanner, I imagine, and I would feel this way if I was him too, is like, what purpose do I have of staying here? Like, why would I do this? He might have felt disrespected. Like, I can't imagine he felt good about the way he was being treated in this situation, and now he can either go and find another job or cash a paycheck from the Jets for, I imagine he had a 2-year contract. Yeah. It's usually 2 or 3 year deals for contract coordinators, and not really public, but so he's at least going to get paid by the Jets for another year, depending on offset language and all that. But yeah, it's a wild turn of events, because if you even think back, I think week 1 is going to be one of those like moments in Jets history where you look back at like how much more optimistic you were, and then things went terribly after that. Like week 1, their offense was like firing on all cylinders. Justin Fields looks like the best he's ever looked. They almost beat the Steelers, a team that made the playoffs, and everybody felt really good about Tanner and the Jets. Like over the course of the season, like, there was a lot of games where they started off like that first drive and they ended usually with a field goal. I think they had a touchdown later in the season, but where they were moving at the beginning of the game, which was a sign that like Tanner had some play calling talent, I thought. And you saw receivers running open. And again, he wasn't perfect. There were some decisions that I often questioned, but I don't really get this, especially because, as with the defensive coordinator job, and look, they haven't landed Frank Reich yet, and now they have to go through the process. So if they don't land him, like, who are you getting? It's not that appealing of a job. You don't have a quarterback. So more appealing than the defense probably, because you have the O-line and Garrett Wilson. But outside of that, like, what do you have? So this is not what I expected to happen today, even if it was heading this way when they were kind of like, we're going to keep you here, but you're not going to actually do anything.
Here's my thing, Zach, and when they moved on from Steve Wilkes, it made sense, because this was a defense and a unit that had talent, certainly a decent amount of talent before they traded Quinnen and Sauce Gardner. I mean, there was legitimate ability there, and they woefully underperformed, where Steve Wilkes deserved to lose his job. The problem that I have with this Tanner Engstrand decision is that anybody who watched this game saw the ridiculous talent deficiency that the Jets had on the defensive side of the ball. Or offensive side of the ball, I'm sorry. There was no wide receiver 2. There was no wide receiver 3. Then they lost their wide receiver 1 in Garrett Wilson. I mean, you were playing with guys like John Mechie and A.D. Mitchell and Arian Smith, who probably should have just been a developmental player. Breece Hall didn't have a great year. But more than anything else, when you flipped on the tape and watched it, and I'm not getting into the X's and O's with this. I've said this over and over and over again. But you could pause the film on the quarterback's backdrop and on more plays than not, circle a guy and say, hey, this dude's open. Hey, these route concepts freed this guy. Hey, wow, this play actually worked against this, but the ball's just not being thrown. With Justin Fields, he was so terrified of making the mistake, throwing the interception, leading to a benching because of that he just was not pulling the trigger. And most times, even when he did pull the trigger, it was an utter and complete failure. I mean, the Jets had a quarterback for the majority of this season in Fields who was one read and run. You just can't operate an NFL offense in that way. And then when you went to Tyrod Taylor, you hoped it was going to be a little bit better, but then he got hurt, and then the Jets turned it over to Brady Cook in the most obvious sign of, we're probably not solely focused on winning games when we have a healthy Tyrod Taylor, but we're still starting Brady Cook. Like, what were you expecting Tanner Engstrand to do? And the parallels to what they did with Mike LaFleur, and LaFleur definitely showed a lot more than what Tanner Engstrand did. But again, an offense with LaFleur that worked with every other quarterback but Zach Wilson, and then he's fired. Why are you moving on from Tanner? I'll be honest with you, Zach, like, I thought the whole going to find another play caller was an aggressive move, but at least you're keeping him on staff, so you're keeping some of that innovation. Maybe the veteran's here for a year or two and then leaves, and then Tanner takes over, assuming this staff makes it that long. But to just totally move on from him, I think it's a mistake. And maybe time will prove that it's wrong, but even if Frank gets in here, and we'll talk about this in a second, but I just think it's a mistake to let him go, because I don't think he did anything to lose his job considering what he was working with.
Yeah, I mean, and there was never any like, there was references as the season went on, as we were asking about Steve Wilkes and his viability, like, where Glenn started to kind of hint as time went on that, like, he wasn't happy with what was happening. You never got that sense about the offense. Like,
no.
I think when they decided Brady Cook was I feel like if you're looking at the stats for the Jets, you have to remove the last 4 games if Brady Cook is your starting quarterback. And look, like I said, like Tanner absolutely was not perfect. Like he definitely had some flaws as a coordinator. He was a first year coordinator with Justin Fields as his quarterback. They tried to build an offense around him. It didn't work. You want to blame the coaches? I think that's fair. If you want to blame Justin Fields, I think that's even more fair. But like as an offensive coordinator and as a play caller, you can only work with the tools that you are given. And Aaron Glenn, by the way, is the final decision maker on the roster. So like Aaron Glenn is the one that handed him this roster and said, okay, here's your chicken poop. You got to make some chicken salad out of it. And he was unable to make chicken salad out of it at the end of the year. And so now we're here where, for whatever reason over the last 10 days, he decided he needed to move on from him as the play caller, or at least broach that idea and start
It's
putting
odd
feelers.
that this just suddenly changed over the
Yeah,
last
that's the thing. And that's what makes the Jets look like they're dysfunctional, and it makes them look like they don't actually have a plan when, that's the one thing he's been preaching is, look, I know we're losing, but I have a plan. Like, stick with the plan. Don't let go of the rope. Well, he's fired half of his coaching staff.
Yeah.
And the quarterback he wanted, again, this is all rehashing stuff that we talked about yesterday, I guess. I can't believe that was yesterday. You and I last talked. But so like what do you have to point to now to believe in with Aaron Glenn? Like the big thing, and I think this is a topic coming up. I don't know if it's next or whatever, but like a big thing that was preached when he was hired was like, we believe in his relationship building around the league and his ability to bring in a great coaching staff.
Well, we can throw this up now, Zach, because it was literally the NFL Combine last year where he dropped this quote, and Sam and Corey, our two producers, are going to throw up on the screen a little bit. It's a very long quote, so I'm not going to sit there and read it, but you guys watching the show can pause it and read it or whatever you want to do with it. But just go on. Yeah, I mean, his strength was supposed to be building a staff. And he spent the entire offseason, whether it was the NFL Combine or the NFL owners' meetings or when he talked to him at OTA's minicamp, boasting and pounding his chest about the staff that he got. I mean, remember the quote he made about Tanner Engstrand about, like, basically it wasn't all Ben Johnson for the offensive success of Detroit. Like, this guy had a big role too, and then boom, he's out the door.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm still shocked at this. So to even expand on this quote, which I know you don't want to read the whole thing, like Mike Tannenbaum did interviews, as you said it here. He did interviews after the fact where he said one of the biggest things is we liked his relationships in the league and his ability to build a staff. And he's now fired both of his coordinators, his pass game coordinator, his quarterbacks coach, his linebackers coach, defensive line coach, and some other assistants. So, like, there's history of coaches doing a lot of turnover from year one to year two. It almost never is in like this setup. Like when it's a losing team firing all their coaches, it usually doesn't work out the next year, is what I would say. Like there's winning coaches, like Mike McDonald is the most recent one, who fired a lot of his offensive staff last year, but they went 10-7. So he's like, we're 10-7, but we can be better. Okay, so he fired a bunch of coaches. The Jets went 3-14, fired half their staff, and it's not an appealing job for someone like Clint Kubiak to come in. So it's a mess. And I pulled this up before. You probably have it about the last coach that I could find that fired both his coordinators and what happened.
Yeah, it was Hugh Jackson in God, I don't even know. They went 1-16, and he fired offensive coordinator Pep Hamilton and defensive coordinator Ray Horton. Did not replace Pep. Hugh Jackson took over as the pseudo-offensive coordinator. Did replace Ray with Greg Williams. The Browns went from 1-16 when they fired their two coordinators to 0-17 the next year. So as you said, Zach, when we were talking before this show, it can actually get worse, and certainly it's hard to feel optimistic about the current state of the Jets. But I do want to spin this forward, Zach, because look, Tanner's gone and nothing's changed. They're going to be fine. I mean, hell, the Jets might be literally listing some of these positions on Indeed with how many guys they need to find. But the big name that we've heard, and it's the one that the Jets have zeroed in on, is Frank Wright. That is the guy that they want. Everything that I have heard from talking to multiple sources around the NFL tied both to Frank and the Jets is that the expectation is that this does eventually get done. Now, it's going to take a little longer to get done than 24 hours ago when Tanner was going to be the offensive coordinator and Frank coming in as the senior offensive consultant, because the Jets didn't have to satisfy any Rooney Rule at that point. Now they do, so they have to go through the whole interview process, interview two minorities before eventually they end up hiring Frank Wright in whatever role they end up hiring him at. From talking to people around the NFL who have been involved directly with Aaron Glenn, who have heard secondhand from Aaron Glenn, the conversations he has had with the veteran coaches he was trying to bring on, he has told them that he is looking for a, quote, head coach of the offense, unquote. That's what he wants. That person that they hire, in all likelihood, Frank Wright, is going to have say on the offensive personnel, is going to call the plays, is going to be involved in the game planning. He can change the staff if he wants and hire the offensive staff that he wants. It's going to be their show because, from what I am told, Aaron Glenn wants to be significantly more involved in the defense, and we're going to get to that in a little bit here just because it ties directly into what's going on with Wink Martindale and whether or not Wink is going to be hired. But with Frank Wright, Zach, that seems like what's going to happen. From my understanding, they were beginning the stage of talking some contract specifics, Frank Wright and the Jets. Obviously, again, things are changing now because of the role and stuff like that, but I do expect Frank to get done here. I think it would be a little bit of a surprise if it didn't, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I would say until it gets done, it's kind of one of those
things. Well, yes, we've learned now.
Until
it's done, it's not done.
So I'd calm the language a little bit, but I also would say like they have to go through this process now, and if it's out there to where we're finding out about how much they want Frank Reich, then they might have some trouble finding minority candidates willing to take these interviews. Like the Browns were having some issues with their head coaching job, and it's. Even Frank Reich, while I get the idea of it, he's a veteran, well-respected guy. He's had a lot of success in the NFL. But if you look at how long it's been since he's had that success, he's been out of the league for a couple years now. Things did not go well in Carolina. Things did not go well at the end of his time in Indy, though he put his money in the Carson Wentz basket, and that was a bad idea. Before that, but that's like at that point you're going like 5 years back to when his offenses were really good, and so. You're bringing in a veteran coach, a guy that Glenn trusts. They played together way back in the day. Frank Reich was a quarterback for the Jets. Again, he's a really good human. Like I covered the Eagles the year after they won the Super Bowl, and I remember being in the media room when the Colts were coming to town, and Frank Reich sent a box of cannolis to the media group. Like he's a good dude by all accounts. I think he's well respected. What I had heard about him leading up to this, and when you first reported about it, it was everybody's like, "There's no way." I'd be shocked about that because he was telling everybody he was ready to retire. I think.
Well, $5 million changes something.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was about to say. So I think he was easing into retirement at the very least. He was helping out Stanford. He was their interim coach last year. I think he was advising for Andrew Luck this year, or that was the plan. And the Jets are giving him the full court press, and maybe he's like, okay, I can make some more money at the end of my career and try and build up this offense for maybe a friend or somebody I respect in Aaron Glenn, and hope for the best. But in my head, and I can't say that this is 100% true. It's just me reading the tea leaves. If this season goes terribly, it feels as if Aaron Glenn is hiring his interim coach. There wouldn't be a better option on the staff. So that feels like a risky proposition for Glenn to some degree, but he also just needs to do what's best for the team. So if Frank Reich is the guy, if he can build an offense, if he can coach up a young quarterback or some middling veteran, whoever they go and get, or Kyler Murray or whatever quarterback they get.
Jacoby Brissett, I'd actually keep an eye on. He went 8, and I looked it up yesterday.
Yeah. Well,
he went 8-9 with Wright, and it was a while ago. It was 8. I think either 18 touchdowns and 6 picks. So he's actually pretty productive. And Jacoby's been a decent.
Brissett's he's a solid quarterback, but
they'd have to trade for him though. As I saw, he's still under contract.
You're still winning 4 games with him if he's starting 17 games. So.
I mean, dude, who are they have? They're not getting anybody who's going to make them win more than
I know. This was our conversation on the Dante Moore pod. The options aren't great. So, how much can Frank Reich get out of an offense with Jacoby Brissett and Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson and a first round pick at receiver? I don't know. It's concerning. And then again, as you mentioned, they still have to hire the defensive coordinator. That process is not even done yet. They just added another interview to the list today. So it's not a great day if you were an Aaron Glenn supporter coming into today, I would say.
Yeah, good transition though by you. They're going to the defense because that's what we're going to talk a little bit now. The Jets, and I know this from talking to 2 coaching agents who had people that interviewed for the jobs, the reason why there was such a lack of information available to the as far as the people and the prospects that the Jets were interviewing, and then when the interviews were actually happening, was because the Jets told the candidates and they told their agents, we do not want this information getting out. Don't speak to the information. So one of these candidates that interviewed, his agent actually told me, he goes, this guy just interviewed the job, but can you keep it under wraps? They told us not to put anything out there. And I'm like, why do they care about, whatever. It's irrelevant at this point of view. But with that said, all coaches talk to coaches. All information eventually gets out. And Wink Martindale was, I mean, Zach, this wasn't fodder. Like Wink was far and away the front runner for this job, to the point where when these conversations between Wink and Aaron Glenn were originally happening in December, once January came, it was believed to be like, no, this is going to happen. Like the conversations between Wink and Aaron were basically going to go down. When Wink flew in for his in-person interview, from what I'm told, the belief from that side was that this is now getting done. This is just a formality. This is where your office is going to be. This is where the cafeteria is. These are the nice restaurants in the area. Let's dot some I's, cross some T's, and we'll announce you within the next 48 hours. When Wink showed up, and again, this is going to be his word versus their word. You know, the Jets can say this isn't true. Wink's side can say this is true. But basically, when he showed up and they started getting into the nitty-gritty, it was relayed to him that Aaron Glenn wanted to call the plays. And I think that threw a wrench into the system. Now, Wink has not, from my understanding as of the time we're recording this podcast, he has not said, I am not taking the job. It has not been declined. It has not been rescinded. Nothing like that from my understanding. It's just at the point now where it seems unlikely that Wink takes a job where he's not going to call the plays. Now, I have heard from one person that he really, really wants to get back in the NFL and is pretty desperate to get back in the NFL, that if the contract makes sense, for example, if it is a normal 3-year coordinator contract, which is completely guaranteed as all coaching contracts are, maybe he still does take the job and let Aaron call the plays. But from another person who has experience with Aaron Glenn and has experience with Wink Martindale, they told me that would be a complete and total disaster. So from talking to multiple sources around the NFL, the belief right now, the resounding belief right now, is that the most likely outcome for the Jets at defensive coordinator, with right now probably going to end up as the offensive coordinator, the most likely option at defense is going to be a lesser-known candidate or Chris Harris returning with Aaron Glenn calling the plays. Like, that's probably what's going to happen on defense. And I'll be completely honest, Zach, I don't love that. Like, I'm going to bring it up on my phone now, but that's not something I'm a huge fan of, because if we're going to be honest with ourselves, like, Aaron Glenn hasn't been that good of a defensive coordinator throughout his career.
You know, on one hand, I hear you, but I also kind of, from Aaron Glenn's perspective, if you're going down, like, go down with your own ship. Like,
I'm not talking about from Glenn's perspective. I agree with that. Glenn should call plays. Yes.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I actually understand the idea of this.
Yes.
But like a year ago, he was like pretty adamant that he wanted to just be the CEO and kind of like put his hands in all the pies, and you hire Steve Wilkes
over the last 10 days.
So you hire Steve Wilkes, and let him run the defense. And now the idea is you hire a Frank Reich or whoever they wind up hiring on offense to run the offense. And I just feel like we're headed in a direction where he's going to be the play caller. I would think Chris Harris would be the guy. Like I'd actually heard like a week ago that like there were people in the building who felt like Chris Harris was getting a legit shot at it, and I kind of
you told me that, and I poo-pooed you. So we're evened on the poo-poo chart, Zach, because you poo-pooed me when I told you about Wright, and I poo-pooed you on Chris Harris.
I couldn't see how they could have sold that, and I honestly didn't even think about the idea of him calling plays because it didn't seem like he was going to do that. But then they added another interview today, Dolphins passing game coordinator. I don't have his name in front of me. If you want to pull it up, or I can try and find it. But
I just had this. I have something else pulled up.
But he. Now it's going to bother me. Brian Duker.
Well, I'll tell you this. This is what
Duker. So he coached with Aaron Glenn in Detroit and in Cleveland, and he just came out of the blue for a virtual interview right after we found out that they were like kind of wavering on Wink Martindale. So that tells you that this job is still very open, I would say. And so maybe he hasn't decided Chris Harris. Maybe he hasn't decided Wink Martindale or Brian Duker. Like I think he's trying to find somebody who is the best fit as a defensive coordinator while he calls plays. And, you know, I never heard, if I'm going to be honest, I hadn't heard of Brian Duker before today. So I had to research him. He's one of those names you see and you're like, I don't know that person. Maybe he's someone they're interviewing for this job, but it really was an interview for like another job on the staff. Like that happens. But that happened right before the Tanner news came out. And my antenna went up about like, okay, so maybe they haven't decided at all who the defensive coordinator is, and the search has been going on since they fired Steve Wilkes. So,
well, here's my thing. I have 2 points on this. One, when the Jets struggled so mightily early in the season with Robert Saleh, his first year, one of the recommendations that was made to Saleh after the year was that you take over defensive play calling and you call the plays. Like you're a defensive-minded head coach. You've called it before. You were so successful in San Francisco. You do it again. Like, you go be the defensive coordinator now, or call the plays on defense. Robert fought it off. He stuck with Jeff Ulbrich, and the Jets defense eventually turned it around. Similarly with Aaron Glenn, it's a complete and total failure year one. And if you're Woody Johnson and you're cutting the checks here, Aaron Glenn's getting paid more than double or about double what Robert Saleh was per year. You know what I mean? Like, and he's a defensive-minded guy. If you're Woody, you're sitting there and you're like, wait a minute. And this is just like, I'm trying to put myself in his mindset. But like, if you're sitting there and you're like, all right, I'm paying my head coach who's a defensive-minded guy $11.5, $12 million a year. He now wants me to pay $4 to $5 million a year to have Wink Martindale come in and fix his defense. And also $4 to $5 million a year to have Frank Reich come in and fix his offense. All because Steve Wilkes, who I'm still going to be paying next year, failed, and Tanner Engstrand failed, and also all the assistants failed that now I'm still going to be paying because all of those contracts are guaranteed. Like, I understand the apprehension there. And I think once Frank Reich started to come up more and I started to hear about that, and you and I started talking about this before episodes, I said to you, I was like, I wonder if this is going to be a wrench in the Wink Martindale thing, because the one holdup that was, and we've on the podcast saying this, we have reports saying this, the one holdup with Wink, I always felt could be money. Like, were the Jets going to be willing to pay him, because Wink was not going to come cheap? It seemed like they were, and everything was trending in that direction like they were, and then now suddenly it's not necessarily the case. And if again, I completely agree with you, Zach, in that if you're Aaron Glenn and you're going to go down with the ship, you want to go down with your hands on the wheel. My concern is that in Detroit, Glenn, like, I looked up the numbers, and people have told me this before. I was like, I got to see this for myself. This was Aaron Glenn's defenses in Detroit in yards per game and points per game, their rankings throughout his career. 2021 to 2024, 29th and 31st, 32nd and 30th, 23rd and 23rd, and 20th and 7th. Like, they definitely got better, but they also infused that team with a ton of talent on the defensive side of the ball, and they still weren't great. You know, so I don't think that the Jets hired Aaron Glenn because of his defensive prowess. They hired him because they thought he was going to be a good CEO, motivator, culture leader, turn the team around. And now they're turning to a guy to run their defense who I don't think is particularly great at running defenses.
So I think his last year or two was better than you're saying, because if you look at like the analytics, it's actually pretty good. And that last year there were a lot of injuries that they dealt with, and they were still in it at the end. But yeah, I mean, it's not like you were talking about him as like a defensive mastermind, like that's for sure. And they definitely were a flawed defense when he was there. I think broadly he did a good job of like developing like talent on the defense more than like scheming up stuff, is what I would say. So, you know, but this last year they didn't do a great job of developing talent outside of Juwan Briggs and I guess you could say maybe Jarvis Brownlee and A.Z. Thomas, but those guys were hurt half the year. So not a lot of development. Will McDonald got worse. Jermaine got worse. Quincy got worse. Sherwood got worse. So it was a rough year if he was involved with the defense in general, and obviously he fired a lot of coaches that were involved with that development, and now, you know, we're gonna go forward, and he, like I said, he's gonna put his hands on the wheel and try and guide the ship in the right direction. But there's not a lot of reason to be optimistic it's gonna work.
I am right there with you. Two quick updates before we wrap up this show. Jim Leonard, it's been reported that he's the leading candidate for the Bills' defensive coordinator job. Again, if Aaron Glenn's calling plays, you and I have talked about this, Zach. We never got the I know Jim's a huge fan has a bunch of fans amongst this fan base, and he was a fan favorite for the job. You and I talked about this. Never got the indication that he was legitimately going to take this job with the Jets, which is understandable. And the Bills have a new head coach. It's Joe Brady, so that's within the division. Zach, we keep saying that we're going to have enough content for the week. It wouldn't surprise me if we're back here doing another emergency pod within the next couple of days or so, because something crazy here happens with the Jets. But, yeah, buddy, I appreciate you hopping on here to talk a little bit and break down the current state of the Jets. As Tanner Engstrand's gone, the Jets are still looking for their defensive coordinator, and it's cuckoo here in Jets land.
Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Jets off season.
There we go.